Greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the weekly Mormon News Roundup. I am your humble host, Steve A's. Yes, that's Talent on loan from Kolob. It's February 9th, 2025. It's Super Bowl Sunday. So excited to have you on board for episode 150. But before we get started, I'd like to welcome onto my program my fabulous co-host, Maven. Maven, how's it going?
Hi, everybody. It's going great. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing absolutely fantastic. Now, for those who are not aware, who are you and what are you all about? What's your 1 minute Mormon story?
Sorry, just taking care of my. All right, my 1 minute Mormon story is that I came on the scene, kind of as like background tech support for Mormonism Live. I did end up going on to tell my own Mormon story on Mormon Stories podcast, and I currently work there still. I also have. It's not my full-time job. I do other things on the side, and I'm also trying to run my own channel and try to get get that off the ground with the. I don't know. I've got some projects going. I had some good interviews, so I've got some things in the works. But it's a bit rough to start a channel. I think even with as much experience as I have. So I
Well, thanks so
appreciate
much.
everyone like that's cheering for me and supporting me in that, including you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming on board. Really appreciate it. Conky, thanks so much for joining the program. And Mormon Satan, thanks so much for being here. Let's see what we've got on deck here for this fantastic episode of the best and the brightest on the Mormon News Roundup here, episode number 150. Here's our outline. We'll talk about David Archuleta's new book, Donald Trump's immigration, all the stuff that's happening with that, the executive orders and the Fairview Temple, and much, much more. There's going to be a lot to this episode. We got to get it done in less than 1 hour and a half. Maven, great to have you on board. Songs of Our Own, thanks so much for dropping by. Let's first start with the Salt Lake Tribune. A letter. Why doesn't the LDS Church object to ICE raids in the houses of worship? Now, Maven, last week we covered that the church released a statement with regards to what Donald Trump is trying to do to this country with regards to the deportations. And it was an incredibly very tepid statement, although it was somewhat, I would say, left-leaning, but the church did not object specifically to the idea that ICE agents could go into an LDS chapel for some of these raids. Why hasn't the church done that?
That's a good question. I know from, I mean, even from when I was a teenager, this kind of anti-immigration sentiment was really strong in my little southern Utah community and in my family, especially. Um, Even back then, I knew, or at least had the sense that the church was favorable towards immigrants and immigration. And I think the church knows how much they get as far as worship and tithing, and really like hardworking and devoted members that come in usually from areas and circumstances of less opportunity. Just they're vulnerable, so they're really good fodder for the church. So I think the church recognizes that, and this is something where they've just always kind of tried to play both sides of a political issue, because it is traditionally very, I think, conservative and also very Republican to be against immigration, especially if it's immigration that you can see in their skin tone. But I am surprised that they don't have a more strong stance against coming into places of worship. Especially Dallin H. Oaks has always been so huge on freedom of religion and the practice of religion that at any point where civil rights would potentially endanger the church, where just treating people equally is seen as a threat, like Dallin is always there to try to get, and usually successful, worming in these exceptions just to kind of carve out a little haven for the church to remain sexist and racist and all whatever it is that it's that he's fighting against. So I mean, it's interesting, and it's also not, because I mean, honestly, I see with this administration, I'm one of those that sees really a lot of similarities in slipping into fascism. And I think this is what happens when you play to that side, when you try to buddy up with fascists, with tyrannists, with oligarchs, with all of these things. Eventually your own rights start to get chipped away, and I think it's the typical kind of response to like not cause a fuss right away, because you know what's going to happen if you cause a fuss, and people are seeing that all over. And maybe we'll get into it a little bit more, but they know that pushing back on these people now is detrimental. So I guess that's what I'm seeing is I think they're not really aware just yet of how much the religious rights and freedoms and liberty can be taken away because of who they tried to sleep with. So
Yeah,
yeah,
so here's the pictures here that we got from Atlanta, Georgia, here, which has a lot of Mexican flags here. And somebody tweeted out, Mexican flags as far as the eye can see. You'd never guess this was America. But Dan McClellan kind of rebuked them. I was like a big fan of Dan. He says
yeah.
it makes perfect sense if you just believe in the humanity and dignity of all people is more important than your right wing, authoritarian, and social dominance orientation identity politics. I do like Dan's takes. They are usually very, very good. And this is happening, I guess, in your neck of the woods here. What's happening in Harriman? These guys are protesting for illegal immigration. Did you see this?
I did see that. My old neck of the woods, I guess this
Oh,
Herman is
right.
pretty close to where I used to live. Yeah, in Utah, and again, it's not surprising to me.
Yeah, they're definitely protesting these are anti-immigration protesters. In other words, they want to see a lot of deportations, and they're using the DesNat flag. A lot of these are Latter-day Saints, which is why Rick tweets out here, at least half of these douchebags are attending sacrament meeting today. That's the scary thing about it. But a
Right,
lot of people
and they have
are,
their faces covered. I just want to point that out.
yeah, they do have their faces
Yep.
covered. It's very ironic that they have that. But there was a big show of solidarity in Utah as well for people who were wanting to keep people around instead of breaking up families and deporting millions of people. It seems like the people who want to have a compassionate approach, at least in the state of Utah, and among a lot of Latter-day Saints, is for a much more compassionate approach than what we're seeing. Even the church itself, in the statement that it released, said that we need to approach these things very pragmatically. What's your pulse here on Latter-day Saints and immigration in general?
I think in general, I think compassion does win the day. It's just it's a few people that are the loudest and unfortunately have a lot of power right now that do not represent the American people on multiple fronts. And I think this is one of them.
Yeah, it definitely is one of them. So we're going to be watching that and see what happens there. And one of my favorite content creators out there, he talks about how Latter-day Saints and the history in the United States have talked about immigration here. This is Dr. Ben Park here. Let's see what he has to say about immigration. He is a Latter-day Saint or a Latter-day Saint adjacent.
What type of arguments are being used to expel individuals from the United States? My name is Benjamin Park. I'm a scholar of American history. And since I'm having to spend my Saturday waiting for my daughter at an orchestra tryout, which how dare she take my weekend, I thought I would use my time wisely by adding a new installment in my series in which I contextualize today's political arguments within the much longer tradition of American history. And today I thought I would do this with the anti-immigrant debate, especially those that are taking place in Ohio right now. You may remember Ohio became a centered talking point during the 2024 presidential election when Donald Trump and others alleged that there were refugees in Ohio doing unspeakable things. Remember, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, that nonsense. Anyways, vindicated in their minds by Donald Trump's election, the Ohio legislature is currently debating a number of proposed legislation in which they could expel immigrants and refugees from the state. So being the careful historian I am, I printed out a number of their arguments, and I want to highlight some of their key points, and then we'll dissect them together. So these are all arguments given by Ohio legislatures for why they should expel these people, why they're a danger to society. One, they came here illegally. Second, they're a drain on public resources. Third, they're more likely than citizens to commit violence. Fourth, they refuse to assimilate into local culture. And five, they're actually better off in slavery. Wait, oh shoot, I made the same mistake I did before. While these sound remarkably similar to the arguments being made by Ohio legislators right now concerning immigrants, these are actually arguments made by Ohio legislators in 1831 when they voted to evict Black residents from the state. My mistake. It's hard when history rhymes so much to not get confused. Anyways, I'll get the real arguments and get back to you.
Yeah, and we also have to understand, obviously, that Latter-day Saints were immigrants when they came across the plains. It was Mexican territory at the time. It wasn't made a Utah territory for, I believe, about 5 years. It wasn't made a United States territory until years later. So the idea that a bunch of Latter-day Saints now are big-time anti-immigrants, I see as very ironic, not to mention the fact that the United States in general is all on Native American land.
I am muted. Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say I was gonna broaden that the same just to the United States in general. There is a very sad irony to white people protesting against immigrants.
Yeah,
That's
there
why,
definitely is. Now, the
yeah.
biggest, I think the most powerful Latter-day Saint who is currently in politics, actually, now that Mitt Romney has retired out of the Senate and he's no longer a senator for the state of Utah, I actually think that it's probably the senior senator from Utah, Mike Lee, who has a very cozy relationship with Donald Trump. I believe that they are bosom friends. In fact, Senator Mike Lee compared Donald Trump to Captain Moroni. Let's check that out.
Catholic friends, think about a couple of things as you approach the ballot and your friends do. Think about Amy Coney Barrett and think about the Little Sisters in the poll. To my Protestant and evangelical friends, we have to remember that it's by the grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ that we've had 4 years of prosperity and peace. To my Mormon friends, my Latter-day Saint friends, think of him as Captain Moroni. He seeks the power to pull it down.
I'm hearing reports that Pence caved.
Oh
I'm telling you, if Pence caved, we're going to drag through the streets.
He seeks not the praise of the world or the fake news. But he seeks the well-being and the peace of the American people. Are you ready to stand with me and millions of others who want 4 more years?
It's been a long time since I watched that short. I released that a long time ago, and I forgot the fact that that short was actually restricted for violent actions because of all of the insurrection protests. I finally got it pushed through on YouTube. But my question for you is number one, is Donald Trump really a Captain Moroni? And why is it that Mike Lee has such a cozy relationship with Donald Trump, since Donald Trump, in my mind, doesn't really reflect Latter-day Saint values? What's going on there?
I don't know that he doesn't reflect Latter-day Saint values. I guess depending on which ones you pick, a lot of Latter-day Saints are fans of him because he's like them, and and they're like him. So same with Mike Lee. And no, of course he's not Captain Moroni. He's the opposite. Like, he does embody the story, but he is definitely not the hero of the story. Captain Moroni would be fighting against this coup that placed him on the throne, so to speak. It's astounding to me that scripture reading Mormons do not see the clear parallels. And as somebody that doesn't even believe in that book of scripture, I think it's a waste. Like, why even have it? Why even have it if you can't even learn like basic, simple concepts like this from it? So
That's the good thoughts here. What about, let's keep this train rolling. One of my favorite X accounts out there is the Lord's Newsroom. They have a lot of satirical takes here, and we have Elon Musk in the Oval Office. You can buy anything in this world with money. Now, I live in Washington, D.C., and there's a lot of these posters that are put up on signs and different places that are going viral here that have Elon Musk's face on there, and it says that he's stealing money from you. There's a cozy relationship that's happening here. And you're right. If Captain Moroni was around, Captain Moroni actually fought the Kingmen. Remember, he was all about freedom, not authoritarian government. And that seems to be the diametric opposition of what we're seeing with Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
yeah, agreed.
Yeah, definitely. Let's keep it going here. The White House here has now established a new faith office here. This just happened just this week here. Look at this. Establishment of the White House Faith Office. President Trump signed an executive order establishing the White House Faith Office to empower faith-based organizations, community groups, and houses of worship. This initiative strengthens families, uplifts communities, and protects religious liberty. Maven, I'm gonna have to tell you, I'm quite skeptical about this supposed establishment of a faith office. What are your first thoughts on this?
My thoughts are that it will achieve none of the above that it lists, that it will actually undermine all of those things. And I can't help but think this is not how I was raised to view the country or value, but maybe because Mormonism was still like the underdog. Maybe that's why, I guess, when I was a teenager, it was seen as a good thing for there to be a separation of church and state, because I guess the Mormons in my town and that I grew up in were still very mistrustful of the government. And so they viewed that as a protection to the religion from the government. But now that the church is so rich and we've got somebody like Trump in power that just has zero morals that you can buy, which the church has unlimited money that they can buy. Yeah, I guess when you can be the bully, then just the morals are all gone. I guess it's only when you're the one at risk that you appreciate the protections in place. And then, yeah, when it switches, you're happy to hammer those down and hurt people below you. That's
Just we're keeping an eye on the Super Bowl here for those out there in the score. The Philadelphia Eagles are up 37-6. They are running away with it. It looks like they're going to be they're well on their way, which, by the way, I am put myself into the back of the Super Bowl here. I think that's a pretty good picture. And I did amusingly say I'm not praying for Andy Reid. We'll come back to that in a moment. But as far as that religious office is concerned, let's see what Donald Trump is doing about that religious office in the White House, because this is quite unprecedented.
To confront such weaponization and religious persecution, today I'm signing an executive order to make our Attorney General, who's a great person, she's going to be a great Attorney General, Pam Bondi, the head of a task force, brand new, to eradicate anti-Christian bias. About time, right? Anti-Christian bias. Yeah, you never heard of that one before, right? But there's... It's about time, isn't it, though, really? So many times you hear, but you don't hear the anti-Christian bias.
What a fucking idiot.
This task force will be to immediately halt all forms of anti-Christian targeting and discrimination within the federal government, including at the DOJ, which was absolutely terrible, the IRS, the FBI, yeah. Terrible, and other agencies. In addition, the task force will work to fully prosecute anti-Christian violence and vandalism in our society and to move heaven and earth to defend the rights of Christians and religious believers nationwide. You've never had that before, but this is a very powerful document.
Never had that before.
Now,
good God.
If we don't have religious liberty, then we don't have a free country. We probably don't even have a country. I will always protect religious liberty.
Uh-huh.
Of course, that means to oppress others with your religion, not to protect it.
I'm really honoring a lot of people, but I'm announcing that I will be creating a brand new presidential commission on religious liberty. It's going to be a very big deal, which will work tirelessly to uphold this most fundamental right. This week, I'm also creating the White House Faith Office, led by Pastor Paula White, who is so amazing.
Okay, real quick here, Maven. You were trying to jump in there, but let me just cover a couple of comments in the live chat. Mormon Satan, protect the Christians now, and also Coach, good things they don't consider Mormons Christian. Ex-Mormons crap posters are safe. What's going on here? Do we need to protect the Christians, Maven?
No. they for Christians today being prevented from discriminating against other people, being prevented from forcing your religion onto other people, that is what's seen as discrimination. We see it with Mormons. We see it with the evangelicals. Just the fact that anyone, will do something that they don't like. Again, they don't have to do it, but they pretend as if like they're being forced into gay marriages. If we let other people have gay marriages that they want, it's just they have it completely backwards, just completely ass backwards.
Okay, let's continue on here. Jared Cook, who I follow on Twitter, is a really good really good poster, by the way. He said, this seems bad. To say no to President Trump would be to say no to God. Because here is Paula White. He referenced that in the last comment here, who Donald Trump just appointed to lead the White House Faith Office. Let's see what Paula White is all about. I actually haven't watched this clip, but I hear it's lit. Let's see. Here we go.
God rules. When I walk on White House grounds, God walks on White House grounds. I had every right and authority to declare the White House as holy ground because I was standing there, and where I stand is holy.
To say no to President Trump would be saying no to God.
And I won't do that. We are in a spiritual war right now. Let every demonic network that has aligned itself against the purpose, against the calling of President
No
Trump,
unhallowed
let it
hand.
be broken. Let it be torn down in the name of Jesus. You want me to tell you what my thoughts are? The thoughts of the King of Kings, the thoughts of the Lord of Lords.
Whoa.
I'm downloading heaven.
Really? What? What was that? We got to back that up. I got to back that up. Hold on. What was that?
Does anyone in the audience have the gift of translation of tongues?
That's some pretty wild stuff there. That's some pretty wild stuff.
I don't remember if it was her or if it was somebody else that said like that she like visited heaven where there's warehouses with like extra body parts, you know, for people like amputees or whatever, just waiting in heaven. I don't know. I might be getting it mixed up with somebody else. But yeah, anyone in the chat have the gift of translation of tongues that can translate what she said? I'm curious to see what your comments are. And yeah, translate for us. Tell us what she said there from God.
Yeah,
So I'm confused actually who's God, because it kind of seems like she's God, but also Trump is God. They're all one and the same. Maybe like this is kind of like the new Trinity now is God the Father, Trump, and Paul. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But you know, that's how Mormons talk about Nelson too. Like there's no real like actual difference, you know.
This is pretty insanity to me. And I know we're not supposed to comment on anyone's physical appearance, but I'm sorry. Does Donald Trump just not have a type of person that he always call? This is like general authorities. They always call the same looking type person for all of his positions, whether it's the attorney general, whether it's this faith chick. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. That's actually whether it's this faith lady, whatever it is, you have to have the Donald Trump look in order to get the call here. This is demonic networks. This is she's going to be paid for by tax dollars. Our tax dollars are going to pay for this woman and her speaking in tongues, demonic possession in the name of Jesus. All this is not why I pay taxes to the federal government, is for this type of person to be empowered to do anything.
Yeah.
Okay. Jefferson, the Madison democracy that I believe in, I know that separation of church and state is technically not in the Constitution. That's been, though, the law of the land as interpreted by the Supreme Court. That's where we got the separation of church and state. And I see this as a major step backward. I am obviously not in favor of it at all. We also see this here that the Trump has fired the archivist of the United States, official who oversees government records. And one of the reasons that I brought this up is that my wife actually sent this to me, and she said, this is the same thing that the Mormon church did back in the 1970s by firing Leonard Arrington and the other church historians. You try to control the narrative by putting your own spin on who's going to be the historian and controlling the archives. It's a very cult-like, it's definitely a cult-like regime here. What are your thoughts on this one?
And there were also parallels with the Third Reich. So yeah, it's a well-established pattern, I think.
Yeah, same type of thing that the Mormon church did as well. And here, Donald Trump also fulfilling a campaign promise. Donald Trump signed an executive order banning transgender women from competing in high school sports. This is covered by Latter Gay Stories. Also, he's going to make it so that there will be no transgender athletes in the 2028 Olympic Games. And also, he's going to make it so that it's going to be hard for college, pressure the NCAA about all of this. The White House press secretary reiterated Trump's position, stating that the president expects the Olympic Committee and the NCAA to stop allowing men to compete in women's sports. Maven, what are your thoughts about this executive order, which the Latter Gay Stories has a very dim view on?
Can you pull that back up on screen?
Yes.
Because there's a part here, and if you went over it, I'm sorry. It's about halfway through. It says that NCAA President Charlie Baker reported that out of more than 510,000 student athletes competing in NCAA sports, fewer than 10 are transgender. And I think that's really important. There's just, it will never not piss me off when a rapist can pretend to be protecting women and children by banning 10 children from playing sports and act like that is some kind of win for womanhood, win for protecting us. Just, it's bullshit. And it will never not be bullshit when you just look at the scale of assaults and misogyny, which is all taken off since he's become president. It's just the masks are coming off. People are gleefully being misogynistic, openly misogynistic in schools and in workplaces and in their own families. So this man has done more to harm women and girls everywhere just by being elected and empowering those kinds of people, that it just kills me that anyone would actually believe that this man, this a self-admitted pussy grabber will, is helping anybody, let alone children. I don't think he's been safe around children either, but we'll never get that though, because I think that stuff's been buried. But I think it's reasonable to believe that he's also not safe around children, not just women. So it just, I hate it. I hate it so much.
Okay, good thoughts. We got to keep it going here. Also, I've got a big news article this week. Bishop Marian Edgar Budd. Do you remember her? She was the one who stood toe to toe with Donald Trump in the prayer breakfast immediately following the inauguration. They were exchanging death stares one with another because she asked for a very compassionate and merciful approach here, and she is continuing to talk about that.
About the way the message of Christianity is being distorted in our country right now. I think it's a cause for deep concern, and how the teachings of Christianity are being ignored by those who are claiming to speak as Christians in the public arena. And so I feel it's an abuse of the faith. And I have to be very careful because I'm not perfect in my understanding of what it means, to be a perfect Christian. I'm not a perfect Christian and I'm not a perfect American, but I think we are walking on very thin ice now. I would encourage anyone who buys a Bible to read the Bible, and in particular to read the teachings of Jesus, and then to set our policies, if we're going to call ourselves a Christian nation, against the highest aspirations that Jesus calls us to.
It takes a lot for me to get behind a Christian pastor because I do not consider myself to be a Christian, but this is one of the few people that I can actually listen to because she seems to be distilling the gospel message down to what we read in James. James said that pure religion undefiled before God and Jesus is this: to visit the homeless, to visit the widows, and to help other people, which if that's the message of Christianity, I can get behind her. And that seems to be what she's arguing for in this particular clip.
I think things are going to get a lot worse before they get better by the worst kind of Christians who I don't think embody those same values that I thought I embodied when I was a Christian, and I think I embody much better now outside of Christianity. And it's unfortunate to me that this bishop's version of Christianity is also, I think, going to be taken down by this counterfeit one. This just really a mask for evil, just trying to look holy.
Yeah. By the way, the Super Bowl update here, we only got 5 minutes left. The Philadelphia Eagles are up by 34 points. You're not missing anything at all. This one is practically in the bank. Now, we'll also give you another reaction here. Dan McClellan has decided to take on Donald Trump himself regarding this religious office and all of the religious stuff that Donald Trump is all about. Let's see what Dan has to say about Donald Trump. I actually haven't watched this.
Bring religion back.
All right, let's see it.
We have to bring it back much stronger. It's one of the biggest problems that we've had over the last fairly long period of time.
So 2 things to note here. First, when someone like Trump talks about religion as a social good, they're not talking about religion in general. They're talking about Christianity, and more specifically Protestant Christianity, even more specifically evangelical Christianity, and even more specifically than that, Christian nationalism. This is about structuring power in favor of Christian nationalism, since Christian nationalism is what put Trump into power. And so Trump obviously doesn't want more Muslims in our country. Trump does not want more Hindus in our country. Trump very obviously does not want more indigenous African religions in our country. Trump wants more access to power and resources, and he does that by making Christian nationalists happy. Second thing to note is that it is a common assumption among folks who don't think very hard about themselves or their religion that more religion would be the answer to the social ills that we've been experiencing for generations now. And the opposite is actually what the data support. See, Christian nationalism is the cause of and is responsible for a lot of the most salient social ills that we've been experiencing. And this goes back to before we referred to it as Christian nationalism, back into the 70s, when folks like Jerry Falwell and Paul Weyrich went on this national campaign to try to galvanize the silent majority, to try to get more conservative Christians to put conservative Christians into office. And why were they doing it? Because they didn't like that the government was forcing them to admit Black students to their universities. But they knew white supremacy was not going to be that great a rallying cry. So they identified abortion as the rallying cry around which they could galvanize this religious rights. And ever since then, conservative Christians have been working harder and harder and harder to arrogate political power. And that gives us what we have today in Christian nationalism. And there's a lot of research that demonstrates correlation between Christian nationalism and attitudes and prejudices and ideologies that harm other people. For instance, this paper from the journal Social Problems from 2021, White Christian Nationalism and Relative Political Tolerance for Racists, found that when we examine relative tolerance toward racists compared to other stigmatized groups, white Christian nationalists show greater tolerance than other whites. This effect is distinct from personal religiosity, which is associated with lower relative tolerance toward racists. Additionally, we find both time and gender moderate the association between white Christian nationalism and relative tolerance toward racists. Findings ultimately demonstrate that white Americans who adhere to Christian nationalism exhibit authoritarian tendencies, expressing lower tolerance for all groups considered, while making greater relative allowance for old-fashioned racists who may be allies in the task of social control and coercion. And then we've got this Sociology of Religion article from last year, Liberty for Us, Limits for Them, Christian Nationalism and Americans' Views on Citizens' Rights. They found analysis drawn from a nationally representative sample of U.S. adults show Christian nationalism is a leading predictor that Americans prioritize gun rights, religious freedom, and states' rights, but deprioritize freedom of speech, the press, right to a speedy and fair trial, and protection from unlawful searches and seizures. Further analyses indicate Christian nationalism is the strongest predictor that Americans view voting as a privilege, not a right. Findings suggest Christian nationalism may incline Americans to support rights more suited to the continuance of the current social order and maintenance of power structures, while also making them less likely to support rights traditionally associated with challenging these structures. Then we've got this Sociological Quarterly paper, also from last year, Our Kind of American, Christian Nationalism, Race, and Contingent Views of Cultural Membership. Data from the 2014 General Social Survey show Christian nationalism predicts white adults hold more exclusionary and assimilationist views. However, among Black adults, not Hispanic adults, Christian nationalism is associated with a rejection of domestic racial/ethnic minorities assimilating. And among Hispanic adults, not Black adults, Christian nationalism is associated with a rejection of exclusionary or assimilationist views when immigrants are under consideration. In contrast, when immigrants are the target, Christian nationalism operates identically for Black and white Americans. The same is true for Hispanic and white Americans when domestic minorities are the target. For ethno-racial minorities, Christian nationalism is thus linked with both inclusive/pluralistic views and exclusionary/assimilationist views, contingent on whether it connects them to the in-group or the out-group. What Christian nationalism does is divides up Americans into in-groups and out-groups and privileges the in-groups while trying to marginalize and minoritize and suppress the power of the out-group. Then we've got this.
Okay, that's I wish we had more time for Dan, but what is he trying to say here, and is he right? Can you give us a 1-minute reaction?
A 1 minute. Yeah, I think he's right. This is all, again, to me, but maybe it's just my background with cultural anthropology. These are not new ideas to me. So to me, they are very obvious, but I guess to a lot of people, they aren't. But yeah, especially going back to what he said at the beginning, that Christian nationalism tends to be the cause of a lot of societal ills. I absolutely agree with that. And then, going to the new rallying cry, abortion, they cause more abortions just by their abortion bans. And also, the abstinence only education. They also go after contraception. They just meddle like in every way possible to almost make this happen more often. So again, they're not solving the problems, they are causing the problems. It's like the church, and then they're trying to sell the solution, for power and money. to be able to solve the problem that they themselves are causing. So it's very sad.
Yeah, now I've been running some polls in the background here. Let's just read the examples on these polls here really quick. First of all, are you pro or anti-immigration? And 83% of you said that you were pro-immigration. Interesting. I also said, do we need a White House Office of Religion? 80% of you said, no, we do not need that. And finally, are Christians persecuted in America? 77% of you said, no, they aren't. So we appreciate you, all of those of you out there in the live chat. Now, we're going to wrap up the Donald Trump segment here and get on to some other Mormon news. But this is probably the most shocking thing that I saw this week was the executive order that he signed right here. This is really shocking. Let's play that for you.
Oh, and goodness, I can't believe Trump just did this.
And lastly, sir, we have the executive order ordering the unsealing of the sealed portion of the gold plates, which will be returned to Earth and translated by Russell M. Nelson.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades. And everything will be revealed.
Yeah.
That's Sharpie.
Yeah.
Okay. Give that to Martin.
It's like a grown-up crayon.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Maven, that is one executive order that I could get behind completely and totally and fully.
I'd be curious to see what comes out from that.
Probably very little, no doubt about that. Now, in a more serious tone here, this is the 175-year anniversary of the Fort Utah massacre. Murder, execution, and decapitation is not as well known as the Mountain Meadows Massacre, but unlike the Mountain Meadows Massacre, we have direct evidence of Brigham Young's involvement into this horrific crime here. One of the deadliest slaughters of Utah's indigenous people by white pioneers this week, 175 years ago. 100 Timpanogos people were killed on Brigham Young's direct orders in an attack that reportedly started with a fight over a shirt. So it was in 1849 or early 1850, a group of pioneers in Utah Valley accused a Timpanogos neighbor of stealing a shirt and fatally shot him during the dispute. They ripped his bowels open and filled them with rocks to sink his body in the Provo River, Young later wrote. And then they were sending, they sent word to Young, and this was all absolutely documented. And it's kind of one of those chapters in Mormon history that is not as well known. The Mountain Meadows Massacre, everybody knows about that, or a lot of people do. This is one that not very few people actually knew about, and that's why they're trying to commemorate it here. Just on February 8th, just yesterday, the Provo River, it's also called the Provo River Massacre. It's got a couple of different names. The Timpanogos Massacre or the Provo River Massacre. It lasted approximately 10 days, and they're doing a Provo River Massacre memorial walk here that just happened. So my question for you, Maven, is why is it that hardly anybody remembers this massacre, which is almost as bad as the Mountain Meadows Massacre, but for some reason it's kind of not mentioned by anyone? It's not in American Primeval. It's not under the Banner of Heaven, and it's never really been commemorated.
I don't know the answer to that, actually, and I'm one of the ones that this was new. I've heard of it just barely by name, and I appreciated seeing it come up again with American Primeval coming up. I appreciate that there are people out there who are always willing to bring these things to our attention, but I actually don't have a theory. I'm curious if the audience does, why this one. I mean, the church obviously doesn't want any of these things to get much light of day, and I think when you have a really good writer, or again, a series, a TV series, these things make things more popular and outside of it, kind of blow up outside of the church's ability to control and suppress. So maybe it's just a matter of time where the right attention is given, by something that I don't know. That's all I got.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. We don't have a smoking gun that links Brigham Young directly to the Mountain Meadows Massacre, although he was definitely involved with the cover-up. We don't know if they did the execution on his orders. The evidence is insufficient or non-existent. However, we have direct evidence that Brigham Young ordered this particular execution. So maybe that's one reason that the church has loathed to bring it up. But speaking of which, the church has released yet another statement on American Primeval, which is still one of the top shows out there on Netflix here. Chino Blanco, one of my favorite ex-Redditors out there, tweeted this out. Deseret News is putting out yet another piece of hagiographical hogwash, a peace-loving Brigham Young. Oh my God, what a bunch of babies. The church and its newspaper are trying to whitewash Brigham Young, of course. So if you click on the actual article here, it says Brigham Young and violence. He said, suffer wrong and do no wrong. And it said that Brigham Young was fundamentally a man of peace. Do you buy that story, Maven?
No. Period.
Can
Or I
you
guess I
believe
mean, I'm
this?
hearing people talk about a peace in a way that's like, from people who are abusers. They want peace in that they want subservience and they want obedience. So yeah, they are big proponents of peace, which means everyone else that doesn't like me, doesn't like what I'm doing, just shut up and sit down. That's the peace that they're looking for. That's the only way that that makes sense.
I fundamentally reject the idea that Brigham Young was a man of peace. If you look at his blood atonement doctrine, if you look at his sexism, if you look at his disgusting teachings about miscegenation, that he said that if if a white person lies with a black person, that those people are to be executed. Now, I know that there's not necessarily a smoking gun connecting his rhetoric to a trail of bodies, but that rhetoric is certainly informs the Latter-day Saint worldview. And in fact, he put in the oath of vengeance into the temple where people were supposed to pray, remember, for Hiram and Joseph Smith's, that their murders would be avenged. And it wasn't taken out until Brigham Young died. Brigham Young is absolutely not a man of peace. He's really a bigot and a homophobe, and has a very violent temper. That is to be that's just simply a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Speaking, unfortunately, of violence, here is this new show that just came out a couple of days ago. I haven't had a chance to watch it here yet.
I hadn't even heard of it.
Yeah, this is the Lifetime Movie Network here. A new show here, Mormon Mom Gone Wrong, the Ruby Frankie story premieres for free. This is the information about it. The new TV movie based on the real life Monfluencer convicted of aggravated child abuse premieres just a couple of days ago. Haven't had a chance to watch it. What do you think about Ruby Frankie getting her own show?
So I want to know like who the two women are. Is one of them supposed to be Jody?
Gotta be, gotta be, gotta be.
Okay, I already have a problem, I guess. Jody got quite the glam up, I guess, in the actress that played her. So I guess good for her.
People love, when it comes to Mormonism, they love true crime, or they like Mormons behaving badly, such as the show The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. American Primeval, they like the guts, the gore, murder among the Mormons. This is the type of thing that captures people's imagination. Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow, Ruby Frankie, Jody Hildebrand, these type of psychopaths, that's what people want to watch. And the church really bristles at these type of things because they think that it's a mischaracterization of the faith, even though that some of these things are rooted in truth. That's why there's so much animus that goes along with it. Now, a couple of other articles here that I saw that were interesting. According to the Cultural Hall, not Codified Ex-Mormon Humor, but Richie Stedman's podcast of the same name, he claims that there's currently a freeze on the Mormon church building new church buildings, and more we are reading of them being sold. And this is in my neck of the woods here in Virginia. Former Mormon church on Monument Avenue to be raised for a new office in Richmond. Have you heard that the Mormon church has a building freeze?
No, this was the first time that I heard of it, but it doesn't surprise me. I feel like, I mean, back in the day, that was, I want to say the name was Miller, but I might be wrong on that. It was some guy's idea to build the chapels and they will come, and it was a phenomenal failure, a big flop, and almost bankrupted the church, and it led to a lot of the financial policies that made it so wealthy today. And I feel like the church has long since kind of abandoned the build chapels everywhere, and it's now build temples everywhere. So yeah, I mean, it's not surprising to me really. It's all going to the temples now. I think that's where it's all like being laundered, really.
Yeah, it definitely is. A couple of other news articles here. Rebecca Biblioteca points this out on the Come Follow Me lessons here. Every single week, the church follows through the 4 standard works. This year, we're in the I believe we're in the Book of Mormon this year, excuse me, or actually, I believe it is the Doctrine and Covenants this year. Started a new year. That's why we're starting off. And Rebecca points out the following. I would just like to point out that in the church news this week, there is a study guide for Come Follow Me that includes pictures of Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery using the golden plates to translate the Book of Mormon. No hat or rock or anything, and certainly no Joseph's face stuck way down in the bottom of the hat.
How'd that get in there?
Even in 2025, these rogue LDS artists are still perpetuating the old narrative. So my question for you, Maven, is why can't the church tell the truth about its own history? They know that these artist depictions are incorrect, yet they still make it into church print. What's the deal with that?
It's not their fault. They've got some really deep moles. I'm sure they had the correct, everything was correct and ready to go out, and someone went in and switched it all last minute. There's a big it's the devil. He's working very hard. So that's what it is.
Very
I'm
nice.
curious. I have a question for the audience before just
Yeah.
speaking of I feel like Doctrine and Covenants year is a year that people will have more faith crises. Is that just me? What do you think about that?
Well, that's a good question. If you were to have in my opinion, if you were to have an honest reading of the Old Testament, that would provide the most amount of faith crises for anyone believing in a psychopathic, genocidal, homicidal, sexist, racist, slave endorsing, sky daddy. But the church, skips over all of the bad parts of the Old Testament, only reads the faith promoting parts. So I really don't know.
Christians do too, in general. So that there's a lot of company for that.
Yeah, there's no
Doctrine and
doubt about that.
Covenants is
That
tougher.
could be. I don't know what the answer is. So that's a very interesting question here. What about David Archuleta? He's back in the news as well. Devout. He released a new book here called Devout, an upcoming memoir from David Archuleta, the former singer of the what is that show? I'm sorry, the American Idol. Yeah, he was the runner-up to American Idol, I think, back in like 2005. Set for a May 6th release, will include reflections of his 2021 coming out journey in time for the Church of Jesus Christ and time in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints before his exit the following year. David Archuleta has apparently signed a large book deal here. The singer just announced that, according to the Huffington Post. He said, "I tried everything not to be queer here," he admitted in his book. He's also speaking with People magazine about it. What do you think about this new memoir here? This is a pretty big story.
I look forward to it. I think, I mean, not that his business is our business. I don't know. I was never I guess I was already out of the age range to be like a fangirl of his when he was getting to be really popular. But as a believing Mormon, I did appreciate that he was there and representing us. And then, of course, once I deconstructed and he still hadn't, I mean, on this side of things, you could see so clearly how much it's hurting somebody like David in this. It's very public, I think. And there's so many people that were really wanting the best for him and wanting him to be free and be himself. And, unfortunately, these things, like when they get to a really critical point, they either do what David did and they find their way out and they find their happiness, or they don't. And sometimes they will take their lives early. And I think by his own admission, he was there. He was on that precipice. And I'm so glad that he's still here with us, that he can be happy, that he can be an example. And I think this book will save lives like his. And so I'm all for it. And I'm very happy for David that he's finally able to, find that happiness and that authenticity with himself.
Yeah, he said, with Devout, Archuleta promises readers an unfiltered look into his life, complete with revealing details and a peek behind the scenes of how he's navigated a very public coming out.
Yeah.
There's just
And
one.
you can see that he tried. Members always want to be like, people just want to sin. They just want to do this or that. I think we could see like David lasting way longer and staying in than a lot of people would. And that's because he was trying and he believed, and that was important to him, but it was going to kill him at the end of the day. So
let's get one reaction from about this.
Breaking news just right now. David Archuleta, much anticipated, and I would say probably feared by the church, new memoir. It's going to deal with leaving Mormonism and his sexuality. It's a very important message. This is coming out in 2 months. So everybody get ready, because if we recall, he's been the darling of the LDS church for quite a while. I performed in a choir with him at a fireside. And as soon as he stepped away and started living an authentic life, he was relegated and left behind. And now he's going to come out and talk all about it. So
that's great. You were in a choir? Was he in the choir, or was he singing the lead?
No. He was giving the fireside. The choir was just the backup.
Did you get to meet him?
Yeah. Not really. He had security all around him. What was interesting about the fireside is he talked about his mission. And he said, right after American Idol, I had 2 managers they all told me, don't do this. This is, strike. The iron's hot, right? And he talked about how he went. And, I knew it was supposed to be an inspiring fireside, but I could really tell that there was sort of an inner struggle, at least from my perspective, in the story that he was telling about this decision to serve the mission instead of, continue on this path that American Idol had opened to him. So even then, and it was years ago, I felt like there might be some conflict in what he was saying and how he felt. But he was a really, really awesome, great voice, and we all love him. So anyway, look for that. Look for that memoir. It's coming out in May.
Let me just ask you a quick follow-up question that goes along with that. Rebecca made the argument that the church is fearing this memoir. Do you think that's the case?
I think anytime that someone steps out of the church and they are their authentic selves and they're happy and they keep coming into the headlines to keep showing that that's what life is like on the outside, that is a bad thing. I was initially thinking, like, would it have been better or worse for the church if David had taken his own life? That would have been very public. There would have been a lot of people saying that it was likely the church and the gospel that had something to do with it. But at the end of the day, it can still become stale and old news. So I think, if that were the scenario, the church would have bad PR for a bit, but then things would calm down. But as long as David is alive and happy, just with any of us, being alive, being happy, being good people outside of the church is the worst thing to happen to the church, period. And David happens to be a public figure and a public face of that. But we all do that. And we all help others out in our own little spheres of influence when we do that. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I have a video that's coming out here that I've already recorded that traces the church's histories about the better dead clean than alive unclean. And quite frankly, I think that a lot of people in church headquarters would rather that David had died before he had become unclean by exploring his gay lifestyle.
For
And
sure.
that's a sick fact of the matter, as has been traced through Mormon history and absolutely never repudiated. So it's just very, very troubling here. But we'll be looking forward to that memoir for certain. I'm certain it's going to be a blockbuster. And I bet you bottom dollar here, I'll bet you a shiny nickel that the church releases press releases that try to refute whatever narrative that David puts out, just like they do with American Primeval, just like they do with the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives or whatever else. Now, this next article here is another tragic story here. There's almost always some kind of an abuse that happens in the church. This time it's coming from a bishop, which typically doesn't always happen, but unfortunately it definitely does. Let's just play this clip here. A former LDS bishop charged with assaulting a 16-year-old girl.
A former bishop of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints accused of sexual assault. We begin with that breaking news right here on ABC4 News at 4 o'clock. I'm Sarah Murphy.
And I'm Lindsay Arts. Thank you for joining us today. Now, the Salt Lake County District Attorney has filed charges against former Bishop Mark Stevens after a woman claims he sexually assaulted her when she was a teenager.
Okay, she says it happened in 2006 when she was 16 years old and met with Stevens, her bishop at the time, while at church. She says Stevens asked her personal questions before sexually assaulting her in his office. He's now facing several felony charges. The Salt Lake District Attorney says churches are sacred in our community. Children need to be protected. We did reach out to the church for statement. We want to let you know that. At last check, we have not yet heard back.
Now, typically, the church does not release statements that are associated with this, but any reaction to this very, very unfortunate and very sad story?
It's a typical story. It's sad to say it, but it's common. So again, just to kind of like reroute to the back, like the beginning of the show, with President Trump and this supposedly protecting women and children, again from about 10 student athletes in the whole entire country. This is the real danger here, that the Mormon Church actively participates in, which is grooming children in theology and just like indirect practices to really kind of serve up vulnerable children on a platter to predators who end up in positions like this. There is no discernment that keeps them out of it. And he didn't have to wear a dress to get into women's spaces to hurt this girl, because that's not a thing that anyone does. Predators aren't, putting on skirts and sneaking into bathrooms. Cis men are walking into bathrooms and will assault women and children there. So again, there's just this idea that we're doing something great by protecting women from trans people, yet the real predators just get carte blanche. I mean, they get victims served up to them on a platter, and the cover-ups, I bet the church has known about this. I would bet like all the money that I don't have that earlier on, sometime way before now, there were people up the church line, up the church hierarchy that knew what this bishop was doing, and they did not remove him. Or if they did, he got reinstated later, maybe a little, slap on the wrist, disfellowshipment for a year or something. That would be the max. But I guarantee higher ups knew somewhere along the line. I guarantee it.
Well, as Scott Linford has put into the comment section, background checks for bishops, please. It is extremely unlikely that this bishop went through a background check. Now, we do not know if he had a prior history of abusing people, but that would have been caught if he did. And that's just another one of the troubling.
If it's reported.
Yeah.
So those are the things that have to go to bed, like background checks, plus like actually reporting perpetrators to the police, both of which the church does not have a great record on.
Absolutely not. And yet, this is another case here that happened here that is put out by Coach, who we saw in the live chat earlier. Shout out to Coach. He said, "What are the odds the defense will claim it was sacred, not secret?" This is a breaking new lawsuit that just happened a couple of days ago. A new lawsuit against the Mormon Church says temple worker assaulted a man during a 1984 anointing ritual in the Los Angeles temple, and plaintiff was led to believe that the molestation was part of his anointing until 2024, when he heard on a podcast that was not what was supposed to happen. So this was back when you were got your washing and anointings there. They used to touch you very close to your private parts when you were practically naked with oil. It was a very creepy part of the rituals, which I believe was removed in 2005, if I'm not mistaken. But he's alleging that it went too far in that particular case, and he sued the church here. What's your thoughts about this one?
Yeah, I went through in 2008, and by then they already had you like wearing your first pair of garments so that you at least had that on with the open slits of the sheet. But yeah, this is not the first time that I've heard a story like this for both men and women in this part of the temple ceremony. I'm curious about Coach's assertion about sacred not secret. As far as I know, that's not a legal defense. What the church usually does, especially with these child abuse cases, is they get a lawyer in really, really quick with the perpetrator. So not only do they have, supposedly they always like to claim clergy penitent privilege, but they also have attorney client privilege. So they really, really shore things up when it comes to child abuse. But I don't see either of these actually taking place, for temple ceremonies. I don't know. I guess with the actual perpetrator, they can still try to get in on that. But when it's when it's going to maybe go into, and if maybe part of the discovery is going to be talking about temple rituals, the initiatory especially, and how it's supposed to go and what the words are, and all the things. I think the church will push back against that. It's already out there anyway, but I know the church won't want it talked about because they don't want anything talked about ever. But yeah, I don't really know if they can really have the strong, like the clergy penitent. I don't know if that applies as well here as it does for abuse.
Yeah, in this particular case, he doesn't know exactly who the temple workers were, so they're just named as, John Doe 1 and John Doe 2. Maybe the church keeps records, but this was a long time ago, so the church tracks who goes into the temple now very carefully. It's all part of a system, but back then, may never know who it was. So they're actually suing the church directly, not the people who were involved here. It'll be interesting to follow this particular case here, because I went through the initiatory session where you just had the open poncho and you were touched very close to your private parts, which was extremely creepy. And there's absolutely no consent that's involved with any of that.
No.
And it's a place that is absolutely ripe for abuse, because you're in a very private setting with someone of an older position who is supposedly religiously backed in what they were doing. So I'm not surprised at all to hear that there's a type of abuse that happens there. Okay, there's real quick, a culture. There's a guy in the comments of my X post that claims we are lying, saying that you put naked under a poncho and touch. It actually happened. That's my life experience.
I've already been told that I've lied about having the veil over my face, because that is also something that has changed. So it doesn't matter. And that was by someone who claimed, and I do believe her, but people just lie for the church, but who claimed to have been a member and a temple going member for 40 years, which means she knows damn good and well that we were covering our faces. But because we don't anymore, she was trying to be a little bit shifty and pretend that I was lying, all the time about it. But no, it was a big part of my deconstruction. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see what's going on with that temple controversy because it's still percolating out there.
We
Ryan
all thought
Josiah.
the fight over proposed LDS temple in Fairview, Texas was over, but apparently it's not. This small town of about 11,000 people has been battling Goliath, the most wealthy church in the world, for more than 2 years now, ever since the temple was announced. To recap, the church proposed to build a temple in a residential area where the height limit without special permissions is 35 feet high. But the church wanted to build their spire on this temple to reach 174 feet. Well, the town council basically laughed and said, hell no, this is a small town. We want to keep it that way. The current tallest building in the town, believe it or not, is the LDS Church Meeting House at 68 feet. So the town council said, build your temple to 68 feet. But the LDS Church said, no, and pulled out their favorite trump card, religious freedom. They're basically being the playground bully. Remember that fifth grader that always picked on the first graders and felt all big and powerful? Yeah, that's the church right now. Well, it was announced a few months ago that the church and the town of Fairview had reached a compromise. The height of the spire would be cut from 174 to about 120 feet high, and the footprint of the building itself was decreased from about 45,000 square feet to about 30,000 square feet. Still large, but not as large. At the time, I thought it was kind of weird because, 120 feet is still a hell of a lot more than 68 feet, but whatever, a compromise is a compromise. But apparently whoever represented Fairview in this compromise didn't represent the Fairview Town Council, because the mayor has now been saying that this compromise is still unlikely to pass. So we just recently got word that Jesus's church intends to take them to court over it. Yeah, the church's lawyer sent the mayor of Fairview a notice of intent to sue. Now, keep in mind, this fight is happening not because of Fairview, but because of the church. The church could easily build their temple within legal limits and still have it be ostentatiously opulent, as they apparently require. They've done it before, or they could build it somewhere else, somewhere that's more appropriate than a residential area, and still keep it the original large size. They've done it before, but they refuse. I don't know why they are now insisting on picking on the little guys, on flexing their legal prowess, bulldozing whoever gets in the way just so they can build yet another of their now hundreds of houses of God. Mansions, really. Each one costs between $50 and $100 million with their gold and their silver and their fine twined linens. I guess I'm just confused how this has anything to do with Jesus Christ. So, regardless of the eventual outcome, I hope this story continues to get the attention that it deserves.
Okay, Maven, what's your reaction to the Fairview Temple controversy? A lot of machinations there.
I feel like every time I'm on, I'm talking about like temple shenanigans with the church. This has been going on for a really long time, which I'm glad that Fairview is fighting. I'm glad it's getting some attention. I just don't know how much hope there is, but I mentioned earlier, the church is happy to be the bully when they have the power and ability to do so, and they're happy to cozy up with bullies. But like with the ICE raids being allowed in Mormon chapels, I think the church is going to learn the hard way the cost of that eventually. So I guess we'll see.
Okay. Pardon me. Here's the statement from Fairview United's media statement regarding the proposed temple that just was released a couple of days ago. Consistent with the Fairview Town Council's unanimous vote on August 6, 2024, to deny without prejudice the conditional use permit applied for by the LDS Church to build a temple on Stacy Road, and the non-binding memorandum of settlement between the town of Fairview and the church signed in 2024, Fairview United fully supports a redesigned temple so long as the roof height does not exceed 42 feet and the steeple height does not exceed 68, and Fairview's code of ordinances are followed. It is Fairview's United sincere hope that this matter will be settled amicably and without further delay. See, it was the non-binding memorandum that was settled where that was not binding, and apparently that has fallen apart. And one more thought on this, and then I'll give you the last word on this.
Do you really want to?
Oh, sorry, after we watch this last one.
Do you really want to argue scripture with me, Texas? Because Jesus said he can build his great marble palaces wherever he damn well choose. And if the citizens of McKinney, Texas say boo, then he will, quote, sue the living shit out of you motherfuckers.
That's a pretty solid take there. I hadn't watched that all the way through there. Any last thoughts on this? Oh, I do have one more meme here. I said I'd give you the last word. Here's the last meme, which I think is pretty funny. This is the face that you make. I'm sorry, what is TFW
the feeling,
again?
The feeling when...
Yeah, the feeling when 15 years ago you thought you could change the California Constitution and have a Mormon U.S. president. See, we overturned California's Proposition 8, where the law of the land was same sex marriage. The church put its thumb on the scale and won that one. We were going to have a Mormon president. The church was growing gangbusters. And now, guess what? You can't even build a steeple in Texas. Maven, my
Well, you
house, the Mormon.
can.
Well,
You
yeah.
can. just just not the one that you want. Or I don't know, maybe they still will. So this meme might not age well,
Yeah.
honestly.
Now, the church is obviously building other temples in other locations. Let's check out what else the church is doing in temples. I've got this queued up here from New Zealand.
It's enormous, bold, striking. Some would say it's beautiful, others that it's an eyesore. Perched on a hill overlooking the motorway, the roller coaster and amusement rides, and central Manukau, this new building dominates the skyline. It's not a cathedral or an abbey or a school. It's a temple, the new Auckland Temple for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's commonly known as the Mormon Church, although they prefer people don't use that term these days. It was announced in 2018, construction started in 2020, and since then it's emerged from the ground and now towers 55 metres above it. It'll be officially opened in April by this guy, Elder Patrick Kieran of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, which is a fancy name for the church's top 12 leaders. It was built by Westland Construction, which is a Utah-based company that's owned by the Horton family. They're prominent within the church, and they've built around a dozen temples all around the world. We're not allowed inside, but it's not one single cavernous space. Instead, it's divided into rooms with special purposes called ordinance rooms. There's also a baptistry where full immersion baptisms are performed. This is the second temple for the church in New Zealand. The first one was built in rural Hamilton, and there's a third one planned for Porirua. This site was chosen because there's a large population of church members based in South Auckland.
Is there?
And because the site is wedged between a meeting house to the north and their missionary training centre to the south. Auckland Council values it at $36.9 million. A temple is not where regular Sunday services are held. It's reserved for special worship only, as well as marriages and baptisms, and only church members of good standing are ever allowed inside. But the general public will be allowed to have tours for most of March before it becomes off limits following its dedication in April.
Look
Okay,
how
what-
close. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad you put Culture's comment up. That was funny. They did build it to code, I guess. So we don't know of any issues there. My favorite thing is the roller coaster nearby. So I guess the nice thing about this temple is if you're stuck on the outside because you're not good enough to see your beloved friends and family members get married or get sealed together, like just hop on over across the street and just live it up at the amusement park. You will have the much better day compared to everybody else. So I'm a fan of that. I love that part of it. And
Yeah.
it's interesting they built this one so quick when others take so long.
No, they said they started building it in 2020. 2020 is when they started. They announced it in 2018, started building in 2020, and it was only dedicated a short time ago. So that's pretty typical. It takes about 5 years to get these things over the finish line, and they valued it at $37 million, which is pretty typical. That's about an average temple size, maybe even just a little bit more money. It's right next to a residential neighborhood. You can see that in the background, and then in the foreground, there's an amusement park. I really like this segment. I thought it was pretty funny. That's what the church is doing with its hundreds of billions of dollars.
Do they have to pay taxes there? Do they at least get some from the church? Because I know in the U.S. they won't. This is not going to bring anything but more cost to cities. So I don't know what it's like overseas if there's.
Some places the church has full tax exemption, like in the United States. In some places, it's only a partial tax exemption for the temples. For instance, in the United Kingdom, the church only gets a modest tax break and still has to pay taxes on those temples. I do not know what the case is in New Zealand. It is a somewhat secular country, which has a somewhat dim view of a religion, so I can't be certain as to what the tax exempt status is. So that's something somebody would have to research, which is unfortunately not going to be me. But this all reminds me of this meme here. President Nelson, who used to talk about the vitamin pump Mormons still waiting for exciting changes promised by prophet 7 years ago. We were all supposed to take our vitamins, and this was supposed to be the greatest manifestation of the Savior's power that we ever had. And is that happening right now, or are we still waiting for that, Maven?
Depends on who you ask. There are some members of the church that are very happy with how things are going right now, and maybe they would say that this misses those kind of blessings.
Indeed. Okay. A couple of other takes here from Nemo the Mormon and Jacob Hansen of the Thoughtful Faith. There's a beef that's going on between them. Let's see what's going with this quick video.
I now join an esteemed group of people to whom Jacob Hansen has laid out the following challenge.
I would like to set up a formal public debate with you on that claim. If not, then let's consider this matter resolved. Please be more careful in the future when making public claims.
Perhaps I can soothe his ruffled feathers. You see, Jacob, I hope intentionally, has misunderstood my point, and maybe I didn't make it clear enough. I was responding to the fact that the narrative he claimed to give Alex O'Connor was the witnesses saw the plates with their own eyes. My point was, it is more complex than this, as there are also accounts that say they saw them with their spiritual eyes or in a vision. My point wasn't about the validity or credibility of the witnesses, but the complexity of the narrative when one considers those other accounts. In offering the debate, Jacob sets out what he thinks my claim is.
Are you willing to stand by your claim that the Book of Mormon witnesses only saw the plates in a vision?
No, I'm not willing to stand by that, because it's not a claim I ever made. Here's what I actually said. Those 3 quotes alone showed that the information Jacob gave Alex, which he claims Alex repeated
verbatim,
was not the full picture of the Book of Mormon witnesses. As for Jacob's point that he still believes God is omnipotent, I'm very glad he set the record straight on that. I honestly did believe Jacob was advocating for a limited God. Jacob's point seems to be that God cannot change the fact that suffering is necessary for our eternal progression. To him, this is a law God is bound by. As Jacob points out, there are Christians who believe in an omnipotent, but in some way limited God. They believe God can only do what is logically possible. I would be interested to hear how Jacob thinks God creating a world without suffering, while still enabling our eternal progression, is not logically possible, in the same way as it is not logically possible for God to create a square circle, or a stone too heavy for him to lift. But all that said, I'm terribly sorry to disappoint you, Jacob, but I just have no interest in debating you on a claim I never made, or at all for that matter. But hopefully we can indeed
consider this matter resolved,
as we now understand each other a little bit better.
Well, these beefs are getting really personal out there, Maven. It's getting really chippy out there.
It's I don't know. I don't even know what to say about it. It's so immature. I just think like Jacob is just a couple years younger than me. Like we are approaching our 40s, and to come out of the gate and just like, debate me, bro. And like, if you won't, then I win. You know, it's just like, and I want to point out, okay, that with my initial interactions with Jacob, I was really trying to kind of hammer him down on consent between 14-year-olds and religious authority figures who are 38 years old, trying to coerce them into marriage. And that was really tough. Like, he had a really tough time coming up with any, I guess, definitive statement on the consent in this situation and, you know, how it looks. And when I kept trying to press him for that, he decided to go on a social media fast. Just all of a sudden gave me his email address, said he emailed me here and we can keep talking about it. I'm going on a fast from social media. I did email him. He didn't come back at it. So I guess like he's such a coward. He's such a coward. And for him to like flip it around, it's just typical Jacob. I think he's extremely hypocritical. He's definitely a coward. And this kind of tactic is pretty common too, which I guess maybe I could talk about later. But I did just do also like another review of him with Alex O'Connor. And I can't remember who it was that I was co-hosting with. It might have been Exmo Joe, or it might have been Sam Pinson. One of these two men pointed out that this is what Jacob does all the time. He puts arguments into the mouths of his opponents, and it doesn't matter how much they say that's not what I'm saying, this is what I'm saying. Jacob will not listen, is not capable of listening, possibly. He will just bulldoze forward as if he was right the whole time. He will completely ignore any corrections about what you're actually trying to say, and that's why ultimately any debate with Jacob is a no-go. It's dead from the start, because Jacob is not capable of actually hearing his opponent and actually dealing with them honestly, authentically, genuinely. He's not capable of it. And it's the same old. You can expect this if you are willing to go head to head with Jacob. He will do this to you the whole time. And I just don't know how you win with that, unless you refuse to step forward on anything until you get him to acknowledge your actual point of view.
Sounds like you got a lot to say about that. Let's just review a couple of the polls that I had running with regarding the Fairview Temple here. Just want to clear that up here. The question is the Fairview Temple embarrassing? 37% of you said that it was, and that it was also shameful. Some 25% of you said to make it smaller, and 0% said to sue them all. Now, with regards to Nemo and Jacob, 80% of you said that there is no reason that Nemo needs to debate Jacob. And Kulch also has said Nemo has clout, so it makes sense that he wants to debate Nemo. That he wants to debate Nemo? Oh, I got it. Yeah, he wants to debate Nemo. I gotcha. Yeah. For those of you out there, can you give us a thumbs up? Give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We'd be very grateful for that. We got to wrap this up here. The Super Bowl is over. Eagles 40, Kansas City Chiefs 22. It is over, so you can definitely tune into the Mormon News Roundup. Couple last articles to take us out of here. First of all, we have from Mormon land, because the President Nelson has a capricious war on the word Mormon, they're floating the idea of renaming the Book of Mormon, and there's a couple of different possibilities here, including the Third Testament, the resurrected Jesus in America, America's Witness of Christ, or any of those. So how do you feel about renaming the Book of Mormon, Maven? And if I had to put you on the spot, what could a new name for the Book of Mormon be?
Well, I wonder who the they is. I've heard this before, that this supposition that because of not wanting the people to be called Mormons, that the Book of Mormon is to be changed, and that's not ever something that has made sense to me, both in or out of the church. The Book of Mormon is named after a character. It's just that we, as the people, Nelson doesn't want us named after that. So I would be surprised if it did actually undergo a name change. I honestly, I kind of like, I'd probably do a mashup of Kara Burrell's like Rocky Mountain, Bible fan fiction sex cult book or something. If you were to synopsize that into a title, I would maybe buy one at least. No.
My personal favorite is the Book of Moroni's Dad. I think that encapsulates the Book of Mormon pretty well there. That's my joke there. The Book of Moroni's Dad. Or how about a couple of other, we're running a little short on time here, so we're going to skip here these last two articles. Were you following the Super Bowl? Are you a Super Bowl fan there?
So no, I'm not really a sports fan, but I did serve my mission in Philadelphia, and I want to say, I think the Eagles were in the Super Bowl, or it might have been the Phillies. I don't know. A sports team had a match, and the sports team won, and missionaries in Philadelphia were told to stay home because it gets a little crazy in Philadelphia when the Philadelphians are excited. They greased poles to keep people from climbing. Sometimes things get caught on fire, cars get flipped over. Sports people are really, really excited when their sports team wins. So I'm just guessing. I'm wondering if the current missionaries serving there now also have similar instructions as we did when I was there for this, to stay inside and do not go outside.
I wouldn't be surprised at all, because the two most useful days on my entire mission were both Super Bowl Sundays. Trying to knock on doors during Super Bowl Sunday is an absolute and total profound waste of time. People want to have fun.
Christmas.
It is, because at least on Christmas they might be open to a message. They're usually hammered in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah,
they were hammered. And the funny thing about this picture, by the way, is that Travis Kelce has actually done spots for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I believe he's the tight end, as I recall, but he did a spot for the Giving Machine as well. So there is a Mormon connection with the Super Bowl here with Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. I guess.
But what is this?
I don't know. I got that up. Andy Reid, though, is a big time Mormon. Unfortunately, I guess for him, they just lost the Super Bowl, but he is the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. And allegedly, he attends church every single Sunday when he can, including on Super Bowl morning. He is a big time Mormon. He never misses a sacrament meeting. And I have this viral clip here where he was asked about what kind of books he reads. And this is the kind of Mormon this guy is. Let's check it out.
How about the Bible, the Book of Mormon, Pearl of Great Price? I like them all.
Your favorite book trilogy is the Bible, the Book of Mormon, and the Pearl of Great Price. Did I get that right? That's it's a quad. It's not a trilogy. What? Andy, come on, buddy. You can do better than that. You can do better than that. And besides, your favorite book is the Bible, which condones slavery, rape, torture, murder, genocide. Stoning people for picking up sticks on the wrong day. killing people who eat shellfish, that's your favorite book. And in the Book of Mormon, 3 Nephi chapter 9, Jesus commits a genocide. You're chopping off people, defenseless man, unconscious men in the Book of Mormon with Nephi and Laban. How is this your favorite books? I don't understand. Andy,
It's just performative. They're not.
you can do better than this,
Yep.
Andy. I released this video this last week. We're wrapping things up here. Paying tithing before feeding starving children. If you want to get my thoughts on that, you can definitely check that out. And releasing this next week here is Britt Hartley has a nihilism to absurdism video that's I'm putting out on my channel as well. Yesterday, I put out a new episode of Real Talk Mormonism, which is my call-in show. If you haven't had a chance to watch that, it is very, very interesting. And tomorrow, I do the Mormon movie reviews at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on every Monday night. The Manners for Missionary DVD. You ever watch these ones, Maven?
No, I can only imagine.
Oh boy, you really missed out here. You're definitely going to want to turn in. Let me just pull up just a tiny bit of this here, real quick. Here, these Manners for Missionaries here.
Unless it might be something I've forgotten. I know.
Let me just put this on a fast track here because it teaches girls how to cross their legs without being delicate, and exactly how to stand up, how to get up, how to exactly how to be a ladylike in every way that is possible, how to pick up objects properly and not immodestly, and how to look attractive and beautiful as a Mormon missionary woman.
Very important.
Yeah, how to get in. One of the most difficult things is how to get in and out of cars appropriately wearing a skirt. She is an expert at that, I'll just say. And how to look white and delightsome in every way and have the perfect bangs and the perfect appearance so that you can snare those guys with a perfect amount of overdone makeup. Okay, this is a very... I bet you could appreciate a review, which will go
What year
live.
did this go out?
This was not an officially produced church movie, but it was produced, I believe, right around the time of around 1998. I believe that is the exact. It's sometime around there.
Okay.
I'd have to
Yeah,
look.
The styles for sister missionaries were still the same in 2008 when I went, which just looked like you were 40.
I just looked it up. It was 1994. Okay, so
Okay.
if you want to watch my review, which I did with Sophronia, I did that review. You definitely want to check that out. Now, what's happening over there on your channel, by the way? What you got going on?
So I've got a big project that has just been taking me forever. Hopefully we'll put out soon. It is a secret though. I'll keep that under wraps. I did actually just do on Latter Daily Digest. Now that the Jen Camp saga, this is I guess an internal ex-Mormon community niche topic that has been wrapped up. RFM just went over the end of the settlement, and so I decided to go ahead and do a podcast kind of sharing some of my view and my experiences working for John and working for Mormon Stories behind the scenes. So hopefully, I don't have an exact date then, but that will be released on my channel and on Latter Daily Digest. So yeah, that's coming up. And then we did just recently did this with Ex Mojo with Gene and then also Sam Pinson, going over just Jacob being Jacob.
Jacob is a great content connoisseur. That does take us to our final segment here, which is the Mormon News Roundup Joke of the Week. And I believe that you have that for us, Maven.
I mean, I would like to nominate Jacob as the Mormon Joke of the Week, but if it's a joke you want, I do have one. This is, I guess, a good one to show. Well, I guess I won't say that. I don't want to give it away, but this is a joke that I heard, both in and outside of the church. So it's equally accessible, I think, to believers and to ex-Mormons. And it's a question in the form of how do you know or how do you call the next bishop? And the answer is you find the smartest, the most compassionate, the most logical, most empathetic person in the ward, and then you ask her husband. There you go.
That's a good one. I appreciate that joke. I want to thank our Patreon supporters and YouTube members out there. I want to thank Royce, RWM, Carol, David, Blaine, Brent, Colette, Michael, and especially a big thanks to Sophronia, who will be doing the review with me tomorrow night on Manners for Missionaries, not to be missed. And our YouTube members, Starla, Jeff, Garrick, big time shout out to you, Emmerich, Dave, and Lee. Thanks so much for supporting this podcast. I really appreciate it. Maven, thank you so much for coming on the Mormon News Roundup. Thanks so much for stopping by.
My pleasure. Good to see everybody.
Yeah, all of you out there, if you can turn on notifications, hit the thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that. And Maven, remember,
Remember, no unhallowed hand can stop the Mormon news roundup from happening.